Hey all, Binks here. As many of you have seen, the nerfs and buffs for the upcoming patch have been leaked. They were leaked by a Korean team, they were translated, and then they were more or less confirmed by Ben Brode. So all in all, we're going to have 5 buffs and 4 nerfs coming to Marvel Snap. As far as what I expected, I didn't really know on the buffing side. I feel like that's kind of hard to get a grasp on because a lot of the cards aren't really seeing play. But on the nerf side, I was expecting what I think are the 3 best cards in the game to get nerfed, which would be Aero, Leader, and Shuri. 2 of those cards did get hit in Aero and Leader, and I'm sure many of you are frustrated because you want Leader to get nerfed a lot harder. I have been pretty vocal that I think that Leader is a lot closer to being balanced than a lot of people think. I think that this 1 power nerf will have a pretty big impact on his win rate. Now, does that make the frustrations that come from losing to Leader go away? No, and your feelings are valid if you feel that way, but I just try and be honest about how I feel about the balance side of things. I do think that Second Dinner has done a really good job with balancing this game. I think that they have to do a lot less than a lot of other games because when I'm playing on the ladder, I see a huge diversity of decks. I think that buffing more and more cards is really, really good because it's just going to keep upping that diversity. And if any decks start to really get out of hand, you know, I think that they do have to keep kind of like pecking away at this good cards deck because it seems really, really strong and tough to beat. And I think that they will do it. You know, I have a lot of trust in Second Dinner. I'm really excited to see where they end up and what they do. So let me know in the comments down below. Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm right on any of these things that I'm about to say? I would love to hear it and have a good, vibrant discussion because I think that that's really, really good for the community overall. If you're looking for deeper discussion, come join my Discord down in the link below. I'm just started a Discord a few days ago, so you can join in on the discussion there. If you've been waiting to try and become a little bit deeper into my community, now is your chance, so definitely check that out down there. But what we're going to do is go over all 9 of our balance changes one at a time, give you my thoughts on them, and discuss a little bit. As always, if you're enjoying this content, make sure to like the video, subscribe down below if you're not subscribed for daily Marvel Snap content. Catch me live at twitch.tv/binks_plays. Enjoy. First up, we have Drax getting a nice little buff. I've kind of talked about why I want the Guardians switch to this a little bit more. It does feel like the Guardians feel really bad when you miss on them, but feel really good when you hit on them. That's why if any of the Guardians you play, it's usually Rocket Raccoon, because at 1-2 he's still kind of okay, but at 1-4 he feels great. So they're trying to change some things like that. You know, you've already saw the change to Gamora that happened and saw a huge rate of play increase in Gamora. And people really like Gamora because it feels good to call where your opponent's going to play. So if we look at Drax, the new Drax, it's going to go from a 4 energy 4 power to a 4 energy 5 power. And then the on reveal will now, instead of giving +4 power, give +3 power. So what we're doing is we're raising the base stat by 1 and we're keeping the max power of 4/8 the same. Let's say 50% of the time you're actually getting this hit. What you look at that as far as like an overall average, it goes from a 4/6 to a 4/6.5. So a nice little half point energy buff, so to speak. This does hurt it if you're trying to combine it with Wong because you're not going to get as big of a high roll with it. But I think that, you know, especially with the rise of Zabu, a lot of people are already started to run Drax. I think that this is going to cause even more people to run Drax. I think that it's a really cool, nice little buff, and it starts to get some of these cool cards where you're calling out your opponent a bit more chance to see play. And we have Groot getting pretty much the same treatment. Instead of a 3/3, it's going to go to a 3/4. And then the on reveal is going to go -1 power. So instead of +3 to +2. So this is going to be a 3/4 that turns into a 3/6. I think this is a really huge buff. You know, a 3/4 is not too shabby to just play down on its own. And then being a conditional 3/6, there's a lot of conditional kind of 3/6s in the game. You know, you see something like Captain America, which is a 3/6 if you fill the board because he's giving all the other things +1. You see Mr. Fantastic, who's like a 3/6 if you play him in the middle, he's going to spread out. So this is going to bring Groot a lot more in line with some of these other 3 drops, and I definitely think that you're going to start seeing a lot more in this like Silver Surfer style deck. There was already some people who were running Groot. I think that was a bit of a mistake because at 3/3 just felt a little bit bad, but you know, moving this up to 3/4 and still having that 3/6 when he high rolls is going to make Groot a pretty big menace. As far as the developer comments go, well, you may think the Guardian specs feel like a lot of fun, can also feel all or nothing. We hope to increase Drax and Groot's base stats, lower the risk of playing the cards, increase their attractiveness in the 3 and 4 cost slots. I love these little buffs. I think that they need to keep doing stuff like this, little buffs all the time to try and raise up the power level of certain cards to meet the standard so that you're not just kind of locked into running the same 3 or 4 cards. I think that you're going to see Groot a lot more in Silver Surfer decks. Sometimes you can even find Groot in just like a little bit of a better deck, but I think that Surfer decks, as far as like the highest part of the meta, is where you're gonna end up falling in. But I love this idea from Second Dinner, buffing these Guardians of the Galaxy cards, because they're really good feel-good cards, and you want to play cards that give you those endorphin rushes that are a lot of fun to play. Next we have HazMat, which is going from a 2 energy 1 power to a 2 energy 2 power, a really nice simple little buff here. Developer comments say, we know there are some powerful looking HazMat combo decks, but HazMat's overall performance is not good. So in this update, we want to raise it slightly. I love that. I think that going from 2-1 to 2-2 is really huge. I mean, you look at kind of Lizard going from like that base power of 2-1 that gets like the +3. Now HazMat going from that 2-1 to 2-2 makes it a lot easier to want to run as a 2-2. You know, if HazMat, if your opponent didn't play anything on turn 1, you want to kind of tempo it out a little bit earlier because maybe you don't have everything in your hand. HazMat, it just felt terrible to run out into the field to only get 1 power. So now it's 2 power at its base. It's a lot easier to just kind of run out into the field. And then in these full combo decks, obviously, it's going to help you eke out those lanes where you're actually playing the HazMat and trying to just get a little bit more power there to win a few more games. Now, do I think HazMat will find places outside of Luke Cage? No, I don't think so. I don't think this goes over the top. Maybe in the meta where tons and tons of people are playing these really swarmy style decks, it could be really great if you're just trying to play a few really big things and hit a HazMat towards the end of the game to be, you know, kind of like a Scorpion, but at the end of the game. But overall, I think that it is going to find a little bit more love in the Luke Cage deck, and I think the Luke Cage deck gets a little bit better, which is good. And over to Black Cat, we have her going from a 3 energy 6 power to a 3 energy 7 power card. So really, really strong, right? Maximus level stats at 3 energy 7 power. Black Cat still just has a really, really hard ability to get over. If this is your hand at the end of the turn, discard it, which essentially means if you draw it in your first 5 cards that you draw out of the deck, you can't really play it no matter what. You're going to discard that card. And then if you do draw it between turns 3 through 6, you have to play it that turn to get any use out of it. It makes it just super, super hard to play this card. I don't know if this is going to be enough to really make it see any play. The only 2 places where I can see it seeing play, some people are running it in Hela already. It's just a card that's going to automatically discard itself and give you that extra juice for Hela. So the extra power there is going to be attractive and maybe make it see play in a couple percentage points more Hela decks. And there's also been this really funky Cerebro 7 deck that's been kind of going out there that has like Maximus, it has Ebony Maw, it has all these different interesting things, and Black Cat might now just be, you know, another card that you want to slot into that Cerebro 7 deck. Is that deck competitive? I don't really think so, but I like that they're trying to improve Black Cat. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to get it strong enough. Maybe it has to go, I kind of like Black Cat at like 2 power if it was or 2 energy, maybe like 2 energy 6 power. I think that might make it see a bit more play, so you can be more flexible as to when you fit it in. But just as a 3/7, I still don't think you're going to fit it into any deck unless you need more 7 powers like Cerebro 7, or you're just trying to discard it like in Hela. Next up, we have Nakia, who used to be a 3 energy 1 power and is now a 3 energy 2 power. If you don't know, Nakia used to be one of the strongest cards in the entire game. She used to give +2 to the entire hand. So there was a lot of decks that would just be kind of a zoo-ish style deck that would not play anything turns 1, turns 2, play Nakia on turn 3 to give a bunch of power to everything in their hand, and then play everything out towards the end of the game. So they nerfed it all the way down to 3/1. It's pretty much seen no play since then. Sometimes you see some bots running it, but now going down or back up to a 3/2 is kind of interesting. You know, we're giving 2 cards in our hand +2 power. It's kind of a conditional 3 energy 6 power, kind of look what we were talking about before. Now does this well, first let's talk about the developer comments. We think Nakia's effect is an interesting mechanic, but it currently has a very low success rate. Want to buff it up a bit more to see if it's a more attractive option. I do think that going from 3/1 to 3/2 is pretty darn impactful. I think that Nakia can see some really cool play just in like Surfer decks right now. You know, Surfer decks already want to run Brood. Brood is a great target for Nakia. Nakia can also just give, you know, +2 cards to multiple things. You kind of want to dump your hand with it. Maybe you start seeing Nakia in some Silver Surfer decks. I think there was already a little bit of testing with it, but they never really took off. Maybe with the extra power, we can start to see that. maybe in some of these move decks, Nakia starts to come back as a way to, you know, buff up your multiple men, buff up your Human Torch that you might have in your hand. Now, the fact that it still only gives 2 to the leftmost cards in your hand, I would have loved if they would have kept it as a 3-1 and made it the 3 leftmost cards in your hand. I think that that would be enough to get it over the top. That might make it too strong, but I really think that Nakia is an interesting card, just like they said in their developer comments. So I do think that this will start to see some fringe play in Surfer. Definitely worth trying out in Surfer, testing out in some of these like kind of like hand buff style mechanics. Maybe you know, it starts to see play in like those Black Panther decks again. I don't know. I'm really interested to see what happens. But again, I love these little buffs and giving some of these cards that have kind of fallen off the wayside a little bit more chance to see play. All right, now we're going to be moving on to the nerfs. And first off, we have the monstrous card Aero, the 5 energy 8 power, which is now going down to a 5 energy 7 power. So we are losing 1 power on Aero. My expected nerf for Aero is going to be to go back down to a 5/6. That's actually what she originally was. She didn't see much play back then, but I think that the way that people play Marvel Snap has evolved a lot since she was initially buffed. And I still think she would see play at 5/6, but she goes down to 5/7. The other way that I thought would be really, really cool to nerf Aero, which I wish that they would do, is to make it so that the cards that Aero moves are based on play order as opposed to just random. I think that that would make the card a lot easier to play around. It feels random, feels kind of reckless when you're playing it. You're like, okay, well, I hope that the Aero pulls the right cards. It doesn't really matter. The way that you can nerf Aero is by making it go in order of when they play it, so that when you're on the other side, just like how you can play around leader in a certain lane by playing your smaller cards first, then a bigger card last, so that one doesn't get copied, you can do the same thing with Aero. You can play the card that you want to move least last. But what that does is it helps with intelligent play. It makes the better player get more results because they're working harder to play around all these possible cards that the opponent can have. So I really wish that was the rework they went with Aero. Let's look at the developer comments. Aero's effectiveness is great for both obstruction and control. Previously, we increased Aero's stats to where it is now, but since players have realized how to use it, I thought it might be a good idea to lower the power a bit. I don't know if 5/7 is going to be enough. I think you're still going to see Aero all over the place. It's still one of the most devastating finishers in the entire game, especially, you know, these people are now skipping all of turn 5 and then playing She-Hulk Aero, which seems just so freaking hard to beat. In any deck that can kind of control what your opponent can play, like these wave decks, playing Aero in those turns is devastating. I think Aero's here to stay. I really, really hope that they do change the interaction with the play order, because I think that that will give a better experience to both people playing Aero and people facing Aero. So hopefully Second Dinner makes that change in the future. Next up, we have Galactus, which is a 6 energy 3 power that the devs have decided to change down to a 6 energy 2 power card. Now this one was surprising. They did say that Galactus was on the watch list, but whenever I play against Galactus, I feel like it's pretty easy to spot out where Galactus is. I don't feel like I lose to Galactus that much. It didn't feel like a problem card, but let's look at the developer comments to get a little bit of insight. Even at the highest rank play, decks using Galactus have huge cube gains and win rates. Some decks don't explicitly announce that Galactus will be coming, and there are plenty of support cards that some decks find difficult to counter. We're going to lower Galactus's power by 1 and then evaluate if further changes are needed. So this seems to be a stat-based look. This is kind of why I said at the beginning, you know, we don't have the stats of how everything goes. We have some third-party tools that give us stats, but it's incomplete stats. Second Dinner really has the full page of what's going on. So if they're seeing in the back end, hey, people should be running Galactus in a lot of decks. I actually love running Galactus and not full-on Galactus decks. You've seen them in some of my ramp decks. You've seen them in kind of like using as a tech card in like my triple leader deck, which was really, really cool. And I had some awesome wins with Galactus there. I really do think that that was kind of one of the best ways to play Galactus, was to be a surprise additional card that you have as an option to win some of those games. So maybe they just saw that other people were using similar decks in that and just rushing it at the higher ranks, because people wouldn't expect Galactus. They were getting these 2 cube wins all the time whenever they used it. So maybe this is really good. I was a little bit scared to see this, but you know, if they're saying the stats back it up, I think I'm totally okay with that. People have also noted, which is really interesting, is sometimes you don't want initiative when you're playing Galactus. So the fact that it's going from a 6/3 to a 6/2 might be a sneaky buff to it. If you're playing Galactus on turn 5 and your opponent already has 3 power there, you're now not going to have initiative. So maybe if you're doing some kind of, you know, Valkyrie, zero cost card, Ant-Man combo, maybe now you're hitting that a little bit more consistency, and it's actually going to help out those Galactus decks who are using it for that way. I think it's really interesting. I'm excited to see where Galactus goes. I think it's a really cool card. I'm excited to see if it does make any big effects and how people feel about this change. And here it is, the big one. I'm sure plenty of you actually just skipped to this point in the video. It's the nerf to Leader. So Leader went from a 6 energy 4 power to a 6 energy 3 power. Now, there are a lot of people who were calling to absolutely destroy Leader. People were saying 0. Some people were saying -1. They should make the actual power. Some people think Leader just needs a rework, which might work down the line. But I think that the 6-3 change is going to be much more impactful than people think. You know, very, very small amount of cards are played in every single game of Marvel Snap. Having 3 power is going to make a significant impact. Now, does it change how frustrated it can be? I don't know. Let's look at the developer comments and see what they think about that. Many players are picky about Leader's effectiveness, and the ability to stop the game and make it difficult to play other 6-cost cards has often been a mixed bag. I'm going to lower the power a bit and see if further modifications are needed later. So Ben Brode even clarified this a little bit further on Twitter, just saying, hey, we're going to lower it down to 6-3. We're going to see if this changes anything, but it's still going to be on the watch list. It's going to be something that we have our eyes on. I think that Leader is easier to play around than a lot of people give it credit for. I don't think you need specific decks. I think that in every game, you should think about what happens if my opponent plays Leader on turn 6. Try and find if you can play something that's really strong and plays around Leader. You're going to see a lot of success with Leader. If you watch my streams, I really do think that I'm one of the better people playing around Leader, even though, you know, I'm not someone who really hits infinite. I play all these different decks all the time. I really do think that if you're thinking about Leader every single turn 6, you can find ways to beat it, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of beating Leader. I think that Leader is an interesting card. I like playing Leader in a lot of my decks. I've been playing Leader all the way since like back in June when I first unlocked, and I've said it's one of my favorite cards in the entire game. I'm happy they didn't just slam down the nerf hammer just because there's a vocal minority of people who are screaming about it on Twitter and YouTube comments and everything like that. I think that we have to have some trust in second dinner. If at 6-3 it doesn't make any impact, I'm totally fine with bringing it down to 6-2. Maybe we need to make it down to 6-1. Maybe we need to rework the whole card and figure out how things can happen. But I do think that if the stats were saying that Leader was as bad as people think it is, that I'm seeing on these YouTube and Twitter comments, Leader would have been nerfed the last round. I honestly think the stats probably say that Leader is just a really solid 6-drop card and not something that's a problem. They're doing this to kind of help out the community. So let's see what happens. Keep an open mind. Yell at me down below if you think that I'm wrong, but I think that this is going to make a significant impact on how much Leader is beaten and how much Leader is played. And last but not least, we have the biggest surprise of the bunch is another nerf to Nova. Now, if you weren't around in the beta in the very early days of Marvel Snap, Nova used to give +2 power. It was the absolute end-all be-all best card in the game. You were kind of just throwing if you weren't running Nova Carnage in every single deck, and Nova Killmonger once people were unlocking Killmonger. This got nerfed down to +1 power, and it slowly kind of regained a lot of confidence, and a lot of people are starting to run it again. But the developer comment says Nova's effect is much stronger than other 1-cost cards, so we didn't think it was appropriate for Nova to have the average stats of a 1-cost card. So it's going to go from a 1 energy 2 power to a 1 energy 1 power. I think that going from a 1-2 to a 1-1 is huge, even though most of the time you're trying to ping off the Nova. There are plenty of games where the Nova would get armored, or the Nova would get played at the very end of the game when you maybe didn't have Killmonger, or maybe you didn't have the time to play it on a destruction lane, and you just be able to play it out as a 1-2 and feel kind of okay with it to get those stats down. Now those days are gone. It's going to be a 1 energy 1 power card. You're pretty much only going to be using this if you can like guarantee that you're going to get the destruction trigger on it. I think that the play rate of Nova is going to go way down. My thoughts behind this are it's probably like a stat based change. They probably saw that people who are running Nova, I started to see that if I was going to run Killmonger in a deck, it was just worth it to run Nova in that deck too, because you can play Nova out at any point. Sometimes they forces them to make a non-optimal move to play armor on it, because you don't really care if you ping it off, and then play the Killmonger later, and then you get some surprise power everywhere. I was running that in pretty much any deck where I was running no 1-drops, and Killmonger is just slotting the Nova into there. So maybe they saw that decks like that were really, really strong and kind of like super underrated. And on the win rate and cube rate side, they were doing really good. So they kind of just like shadow nerfed this card just a little bit before people kind of like take into account how good it is. They actually did this with card Koye. Koye used to be a 2 energy 1 power that gave +2 to all the cards in your deck, and then it was adjusted a couple of times to where it is now, and still sees some play and it's still pretty good. But no one was really running a Koye that much, and people were really confused as to why it was changed. And then people realized like how good it was, how we were kind of taking it for granted. So I think this is kind of a similar thing that's happening to Nova. I don't know how to feel about this one. I kind of feel neutral about it. Might be the same thing to do until more people start to take in it, but you're definitely going to see a lot less Nova just kind of thrown into decks and much more on just the destroy side. Well, that's it for the buffs and nerfs. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought my best take was, what you thought my worst take was. Once again, join the Discord. It's brand new and check it out. But thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, out. Make sure to subscribe. Watch that one too.